Dobar dan, everybody, and welcome to Croatia again. Today we are continuing our exploration of Croatia. As you know, we went out to lunch earlier at a really nice place, and we had a beautiful lunch and wandered through some olive trees. But now we are in a city that I really wanted to show you. I know some of you joined me for my talk on Venice a few weeks ago, and because of that, I really had a hankering to come and show you the city I talked a lot about in that particular talk. Now, if you look up here, you can see the Venetian lion. And that's because we are in Zadar, Croatia, which was Zara in the past. This is the city that in the 1200s, the Fourth Crusade came and conquered this city before it moved on to Constantinople. And this is where they met the child emperor who would become the emperor of Constantinople. So it was a very interesting piece of history that I was interested to come and see in person, to check out a little bit. And we have come here today to explore it with a local guide. So I'm just going to take you for a little walk. They're going to meet us in the next square. As you can tell, you can look at this facade here. This is our main gate. He just explained to us that this main gate here was the only land entrance because Zadar is basically like a finger. It's almost like a peninsula. And you can see those little hooks up there. Those little hooks were for the drawbridge. So there used to be a drawbridge, and if you didn't make it back into town before curfew, you were stuck outside. The other little detail that I wanted to point out is you can see the little guy on the horseback. Now that's the local saint, the patron saint of the town. Look how the Venetians have just slapped their Lion of St. Mark right on top. They wanted to make sure you knew who was important and who was leading the town. So we are going to be doing a live stream tour for about 45 minutes to an hour today, so I hope you have time on this lovely Saturday morning to join us as we walk through Zadar. A couple of the other little factoids that our local guide shared with me earlier. He was saying, I'm just interested in the Venetian end of this, even if this is a very layered city that has history from the Ottomans, World War II, Roman times. He was telling me about how the Venetians, when they ruled this city, you could only marry people from other Venetian-ruled cities. So you couldn't marry from other cities in Croatia. They just had to be ones that were Venetian cities. So remember, this was part of Italy in the past. This was part of Venice, but it's been held by a lot of different powers. So we're going to have a very nice tour today with our local guide. Good evening. So, I'd like to introduce you to our local guide. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ivica. That spells Ivica, but for most of the English-speaking guests, it will be easily as Johnny. It's a true translation of my name. Ivan is John, and Ivica is Johnny. Welcome to the beautiful city of Zadar, and we're standing on one of the most beautiful squares of the city of Zadar, the square of 5 wells. 5 beautiful crowns on a big cistern containing the rainwater. Besides the big and thick city walls that Venice built around the city in the 16th century, in order to survive a siege, city needs to have supplies of water. So the Venice actually built 3 big water reservoirs in the city of Zadar. One here at the very entrance of the city, just behind the land gate, entering from the land into the city of Zadar. One right in the middle of the city, and totally the other end of the city, the far side of the old town, they made a cistern with 3 crowns, making it the square of 3 wells. So then don't get them confused when you come to Zadar.
That's pretty similar.
This is a really beautiful square, encircled by the thick walls from the Venetian period, from the 16th century, and older medieval 12th, 13th century walls, slim walls made to protect the city from the knights attacking it with arrows, lances, swords, or eventually catapults, equipment like that. But very likely protecting the city from the very same Venetians. Zadar had a really rough history. It includes the Liburnian, one of the Illyrian people. It includes the Romans, the Byzantines, the Croatians, the Hungarians. The Venice was on and off from the 11th to the 15th century, and then the full Venetian dominance from the 15th to the end of the 18th century. So we have a lot of these traces throughout the city. We'll walk across the square of 5 wells. You might notice if you look down that the surface is tilted from the middle where the crowns are to the sides where these gutter canals are, and the gutter canals are leading to the grills on each end of the square, where even in the old days, it's modernized today, but even in the old days the rainwater would be filtered and then the pure water was kept in the cistern underneath.
And that's something that people might be familiar with from Venice, if they'd been to Venice, the same thing. Yep, same engineering.
It was the same similar engineering in most of the cities that had problems with the supplies of the fresh water.
Yeah.
There's a nice lounge bar on the what used to be the one of the bastions of the Venetian fortifications of the city from the 16th century. From 2017, Zadar is on the list of the UNESCO's World Heritage, together with 5 other cities that all had their walls or fortifications constructed in the same period to keep it in the hands of the Venice.
Come on, one really.
So is it quiet right now because there's less tourism? Because it seems like it's mostly locals right now.
Yes, it is mostly locals, but there are some tourists even at this moment. It's definitely more quiet than it was 2 years ago in 2019. But although we're missing some of the income from the tourism, some locals don't mind it because it's a more quieter way of life that people are slightly used to on. The square here is popular place for taking wedding photos for young couples. It's a pity because of the gathering restrictions. There are no weddings we usually have on at this very moment because we're quite traditional and like to have a big wedding, sometimes with 200 or maybe even more invitees. That's probably the reason why we don't get to see any newlywed couples at this very moment. Right?
So for those of you joining us now, we are doing a walking tour, a virtual tour of Zadar, Croatia. I'm being joined today by Andrew, of course, as always, and our local guide who you can call Johnny. So if you have questions, please ask him and I will pass your questions along.
The history of Zadar is a very layered one. So coming down from the walls of the Venice from the 16th century, we are passing now the line of the 12th century wall we saw a few minutes ago. You can see the wall just behind the pentagonal tower from the 13th century that has a narrow slits for arrowers defending the city. The tower is referred as a captain's tower because in a neighborhood nearby was the house of the Venetian captain, the man in charge of the defenses of the city, the captain of the city guard. If we were to follow the line of the wall behind the tower, it goes right next to our feet or under our feet and gets to the ruins of the city main gate from the 13th century. You'll notice these gates are slightly more to the north than the Venetian ones. The Venetians moved the main entrance to the city slightly to the south, and this was only reopened back at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, when part of the Venetian wall was demolished here. City was reopened to reconnect with the mainland by this street. And the buildings, newer buildings, were built end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. This was the old sort of a crafts school of Zadar. It was donation of one merchant family of Zadar. The the condition in the deed, it must remain in the educational purposes, and the old building should be renovated soon to become part of the Zadar University, which has a tradition from 1396, when the first university in Zadar was established. Coming from the medieval gate from the 13th century, we come to the ruins of the Roman gate from the 1st century of our era. Zadar becomes a Roman colony in 1st century before our era. We're standing here approximately 2 meters above the Roman level of the city, and we're looking at the foot of the Roman gate. The other foot is actually at the base of the house there. You can see the narrow passage for the pedestrian between 2 blocks. Right here where we're standing, where all these bicycles are parked, was also passage for the wheeled transportation means, for the chariots entering the main Roman street right here. Looking down the main street, you can see pretty much all the way to the other end. You can maybe make out the bell tower of the Church of Our Lady of Health at the other end of the main street, with a small park and a tree visible behind it. Besides the foot of the Roman gate, we have foundations of the Roman tower that was protecting the gate as well. The other tower, unfortunately, is hidden under the house, sitting on the foot of the gate.
Well, what are they doing leaving that house? They should just tear it down, shouldn't they?
Well, not necessarily. We cannot bring everything back to the old shape of the city. There are inhabitants living here. There are NGOs having their offices in the ground floor of the building. We have a curious thing here. It's an original Roman column, but not in its original place. It is actually made out of the sections of several Roman columns that collapsed after the earthquake in the end of the 5th, beginning of the 6th century. And then some 300 years ago, pieces of the Roman columns were collected. These big sections were transported to this location and reassembled, almost like a Lego blocks, into this column we're looking right now, in this very position, marking thus the beginning of the Roman street, which still extends through the heart of the city. As I was mentioning the wedding of the city, the church on our right-hand side is one of the most popular churches for the wedding. Besides being nicely decorated inside, it has a storyline that really connects with the young families. Even all the children driving around the church right now can have something to do with this church as well. The church is dedicated to Saint Simeon the Just, the old man who held baby Jesus on his hands. He's a sort of a patron of the children. When he's celebrated the 8th of October, the local people bring their children here for the blessing. Since it is a saint who held baby Jesus on his hands, in the history when it was more popular to have a male heir to the family, the practice, I hope, is more abandoned these days. Local women would pray for a male child here to the Saint Simeon. I'm not sure is it true or not, but I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law was married right here in this church, and he has 5 children. First 4 are boys.
It works.
He really had to work to get a girl. I myself, I'm married in another church, St. Anthony's, and I had 2 girls, and now a third is a boy.
Ah.
You'll notice that the church has two colors. It's not that we don't get to afford to paint the church same color. It's a different periods of construction of the church. White part being the oldest part of the church, roughly 6th century. Back then it was Saint Stephen's Church, only to become Saint Simon Church in the 17th century. Unfortunately, Zadar had a really rough history, even that more recent history. So in the upper brown part of the church, the more recent part of the church, you'll see those whiter patches, which are actually patches of repairing the church after the 1990s war, when the city was bombed and shelled, when the church of Saint Simon was carved together with the neighboring houses as well. And unfortunately, the big palace on our left, called Rector's Palace, was burned in the bombardments. Back then it featured the public library of the city, the musical school, and spaces for concerts and exhibition. It is fully renovated. Now again we have concert spaces inside, as well as the exhibition area. Rector, to whom the palace belonged, was a sort of a mayor of the city in the Middle Ages and in the time of the Venice. The Rector's Palace connects to another palace, which is Providore's Palace. Providore, as provider, was a Venetian carer not only of the city of Zadar, but of the entire region. So this was a sort of an administrative center of the city in the time of the Venice. After the fall of the Venice, it became the seat of the Austrian-Hungarian army, whose government lasted till the end of the First World War. And unfortunately, between two world wars, Zadar belonged to Italy. Between two world wars, Zadar was unnaturally separated from its surrounding areas. It was a small Italian enclave surrounded by the territory of the first Yugoslavia, Kingdom of Yugoslavia.
Well, that explains why when we were walking into town, I recognized some Italian fascist-style buildings. So they were Italian fascist buildings.
Yes. Depends which way you come to the city of Zadar. You can even, on the outskirts of the present-day city, you can notice the line of the Italian bunkers.
Really?
The city of Zadar is surrounded by over 250 Italian bunkers.
Wow.
Built from 1930s all the way to 1941, when the Second World War started in this area here. The circle of bunkers were built to prevent of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia ever trying to regain control of the city of Zadar.
What was it called at that time when it was dominated by Italy? What did the Italians call it?
The Italians called the city of Zadar Zara.
Oh, it was Zadar then. Okay. I just am remembering a story. I don't know if it's the right one, though, of Gabriele D'Annunzio. Was he the one who was here? Or is that something else? That was Istria, maybe. Was he in Istria?
Istria.
He was in Istria.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
There are plenty of...
And there are plenty of people in Italy these days who think that Istria belongs to Italy still, right?
In Italy, you still have sort of an Italian exile government of the city of Zara as well.
Really?
There are still, unfortunately, some that hope that Zadar become again Italian. One of the unfortunate events in the aftermath of the Second World War, that a lot of the people of the Italian majority left from the city of Zadar, including those that were making Zadar famous liqueur maraschino.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
You can find in Italy the factories of the family Luxardo or Drioli,
Yeah.
and they have dates when they established the companies, but the companies were actually established in Zadar. Unfortunately, the aftermath of the Second World War in the area of ex-Yugoslavia was sort of a communist revolution as well,
Yeah.
where the communists took the control, and unfortunately they seized the property of the rich industrials of the city, including the surviving distilleries after the Second World War. Since the main product of these distilleries was maraschino cherry,
Yeah.
which is liqueur derived through the distillation of the cherries,
Yeah.
so it loses the color but keeps the flavor. The new company established after the Second World War was called Maraska, like the cherry brand, like we
Gotcha.
pronounce it in Croatian language.
Well, you have actually solved a mystery for me. I have always wondered why it is that you don't see maraschino cherries in Italy. I've never actually looked into it, but
Say
there we go.
The best maraschino is produced in Zadar area because it is the most perfect combination of the soil and sunlight. In the very beginning, I believe the name for the liqueur is described by the monks, basically, who wrote the first recipes, was Ros Solis.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense because I've seen cherries, the amarena, but I've never seen maraschino cherries in Italy. So now I know they're from here. I hope all of you can see the beautiful light right now. It's evening, it's about 8 o'clock, it's around 70 degrees out here, and just the absolute beautiful atmosphere. I hope you guys get a sense of the atmosphere here. Sounds like, go ahead.
We got to the main square of the city. It evolved in this position from the 10th century approximately, since the Roman center of the city was destroyed in a big earthquake in the 5th, 6th century. The new center in the Middle Ages sort of shifted here closer to the main entrance, to the main gate of the city. It changed over the history, and today it features mostly Venetian period buildings. On the far side of the square you can see the town guard building, sort of a Venetian police precinct for policing the city if rebellious Croatian inside of Zara would rebel against the Venetian government. They would have their soldiers ready on the main square, and the round openings on each side of the gate towards the town guard were actually for cannons, if it's necessary to overvoice the rebels, some Croatians.
And you were telling us earlier that town guards were not allowed to be locals.
No. Locals were not at all allowed to serve in the city guard. That was either Venetian soldiers or the mercenaries serving for Venice.
So could we just stop for 1 second then? Because it seems to me in this, what we're hearing is that this has been dominated by a lot of different people. How many different people have dominated Zara over the years?
Well, let's see. Illyrians were first to found a settlement here that was called Zadar. Then the Romans came and established a colony called Zadar. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Byzantines came and called the city Diadora. Then Croatians settled the area, mixed with the local population, married with the girls from the city of Zadar, established the connection, so eventually making the city part of the Croatian kingdom. For all these powers, Zadar was a strategic place, almost in the center of the eastern Adriatic coast, dotted by the islands, which is good for sailing and plenty of cover if the weather will change, and obviously it was very important for Venice. So we had on and off Venetian government and rebellions against the Venetian government from the 11th to the beginning of the 15th century, and then from the 15th to the 18th century we had the full Venetian government. After the fall of Venice, I mentioned the Austrian government, but we had a short French government under the Napoleon as well.
This sounds like Sicilian history, so tons and tons of different dominations.
There were even British forces helping Austrians chase out French out of the city. Zadar was Italian between two world wars, bombed by Allied forces of different nations. And then, of course, we were part of the Yugoslavia to suffer the 1990s war against the Serbian rebels, and unfortunately, the Yugoslav National Army that sided with the Serbian rebels. So there's plenty of turbulence in the Zadar history. The evidences of it all are around us. The far building, the big building in front of us, slightly blocked by the sun umbrellas at the moment, is actually town hall built by the Italians between two world wars. If you look around the main square, make a circle, you'll notice that all other buildings are actually lower than the town hall that we started with, including the Venetian city guard building. The Italian government between two world wars, since this was their enclave, they wanted to show that their government is the best in the history of city, building the bigger and whiter town hall than any other historical monuments on the main square. Plus, we'll go closer to the building itself. The building was decorated by the reliefs, which still stand in their original position. The reliefs on the town hall of the city of Zadar actually show the other coastal cities in Dalmatia, like the Cathedral of Šibenik. To the corner is the relief of the peristyle in the Diocletian's palace in Split. Around the corner is the relief of Dubrovnik. And then we have a Roman amphitheater in Pula in the northern Croatian coast, and the relief of Koper in Slovenia.
It's Koper. Okay, that's where Andrew lives.
That's the relief of where I live. It still looks like that.
It's true, it does.
Connect all the dots
Yeah.
on the town hall of Zadar, you get the message that Italy will rule the entire coast, from Koper in the north to the city Dubrovnik in the south.
So this was aspirational. It was the fascist government projecting what they wanted.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So just as an interesting sideline, I spend a lot of time in Sicily, and one of my favorite things in Palermo actually is what they call the Hall of Victories. They built a building just to display the fascist victories that never happened. So this is very typically Italian, and this is all a surprise to me. I had no idea. You guys know how interested I am in Italian fascist architecture, so this is really cool. So where to next?
We're returning to the main street. There are secrets to discover in the bars of the city of Zadar.
Uh-oh.
So I will not discover them as we walk through. I have to leave something for you to discover when you visit the city of Zadar.
All right. You're tempting me. You know, Andrew and I like to get in trouble, so...
Beside the city guard, the Venetians, Giangiorilliamo San Michele, the nephew of the architect who built the main city gate, the land gate, and the city walls of Zadar, was the new loggia, basically sort of a town hall slash courthouse of the 16th century. This was the place where the Venetians would proclaim the new regulations, new taxes for the city. And of course, when people would not like what they hear, they would protest here in the main square. And thus the city guard on the other side that we explained later on. Because of all the steering of the people on this main square, today we call it Narodni Trg, the People's Square, simply enough. Although through the history it had different names, like Platea Magna, the big square basically, called, or Piazza del Signori, the square of the gentlemen, because it was the gentlemen, the important people of the city that were meeting here for the city council meetings.
So there's the
We're
cannon
returning
holes.
back to the main street.
Beautiful.
In the distance, we can see the bell tower of the cathedral pointing out to the sky, pretty much in the middle of the old town.
So just for those of you that are joining us, just another note that we are doing a live virtual tour today with our local guide. We're going to call him Johnny, even though that's not his name. It is in English. And if you are interested in asking questions, please do. And this is also just your little daily reminder that this whole trip is brought to you by Patreon people. So please, if you are interested in helping to support our work, become a Patreon person. Please, please, please. All right. What a beautiful night we have. Is it always this pleasant?
Yes, this is the heart of the city. It's a sort of a big boardwalk for the people of the city, since we have a lot of influence and the history with the Italians.
I was going to say, this is your Passeggiata Street, right?
Yes, this is where we come to meet our friends. Depending on the personal preferences, we like to show off the new fashion. Young people like to come here either to pick or to show off their new love interests. So this is a true heart of the city. It's lined with plenty bar terraces, coffee shop terraces, which is one of the big traditions of Zadar, to have a coffee with your friends. Hi. This is the place, like I just said, hi, where you're most likely to meet acquaintances, friends, or even relatives. This is a sort of before internet, where you would learn the news of the city, gossips, and things that happen in the city. You just sit down for a coffee, and you can hear the people around talking about the new things, or you're likely to meet somebody who you know, who will come walking by, but eventually sit with you for a coffee and fill you in on the most recent details of the city.
Gorgeous, beautiful light tonight. Yeah, I feel like I'm in an Italian city. I would, if you just dropped me here, I would assume it was Italy.
In this point here already, in a lot of places in the old town, you can see the Roman net of the streets. The longitudinals, like the one we're walking here, there's about 5 of them through the city, but also you can see the transversals going from the one end of the city completely to the other end of the city. Of course, through the centuries, the new buildings were built, so the line of the street got a little bit crooked, but in some perfect alignment, you could almost see the city wall of towards the port on one side and the open sea on the other side, since the city does open to the sea, where the walls were removed at the end of the 19th century. The central part of the main street is called Široka ulica, which literally translates as the wide street. But if you speak with locals, most likely they'll tell you it's called Calle Larga.
Oh, that's Venetian.
That's Venetian.
Yeah,
You know the meaning of it?
it's the large street.
The wide street.
But that's not Italian, because we don't say calle in Italian. That's Venetian.
That's Venetian.
That's cool. Wow.
Since it is the heart of the city, there is even a popular song of this very street. Well, the song is actually a walk through the city similar to the one we're doing, going from one landmark to the other of the city. But the main verses of the song, it actually connects to Calle Larga Street.
Yeah.
Calle Larga, moja radosti, tu sam proveo najlepše dane moje mladosti. Calle Larga, my joy of life. It is here that I have spent the best moments of my youth, says the song. So you have to, if you come to Zadar, to experience the true soul, true heart of Zadar, you really have to come and walk the main street. It is filled today even by locals, but also some tourists and visitors of the city as well.
You're breaking hearts with that song, you know, I can tell. So somebody has a great question. They'd like to know, in Venice, the typical drink is the spritz. Is there a typical aperitivo here in Zadar?
Of course, the typical aperitivo is maraschino.
Is it? Well, I think we need to finish off our day with a spritz.
We'll certainly try.
We'll give it a shot. We'll see if we can come up with one. Great questions, you guys. Any other questions, please feel free to ask, and we will pass them on to our guide. So I'm just curious, if people come here and they would like to get in touch with you, how can my viewers get in touch with you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find. You can find me on Facebook or on my website. It's simply enough, itravel.hr.
itravel.hr. Okay, and I'll be sure to put that in the post as well so that you can follow him, because he's a fantastic guide. You're getting a lot of people are commenting on what a great guide you are, just so you know.
Thank you very much, everybody. You can see that the main street is decorated with the flags. For national holidays, it's always decorated a few days before.
Oh, there's a holiday. What holiday is it?
The 3rd of June is the national holiday. It is a religious one, but since we are a heavily traditional Catholic country, we have several religious holidays that are part of the national calendar of the national holidays. Besides the Croatian flag with a typical red and white coat of armors, so resembling checkerboard, chessboard, we have also these completely blue flags of the city of Zadar. These are the flags of the city of Zadar. So beside the national flags are local flags. In the blue field is the shield with the blue color of the sea at the bottom, white probably representing the local stone, limestone, and traditional Croatian red color in the top part of the shield. But in the middle you have a knight on the horse, which is the main patron of the city, Saint Kershavan, which is featured on the flag and on the coat of arms of the city of Zadar. Coming to the middle of the old town, to the intersection of the Roman Cardo Maximus and the Roman Decumanus Maximus, we also come to the area of the religious center of Zadar.
Beautiful.
Because of the destruction of the Second World War done by Allied forces, because of the presence of the Italian and later German forces in the city of Zadar, a lot of the historical center has suffered and was rebuilt after the Second World War in more modern style. So the main street is heavily dotted with a modern architecture, sort of a 20th century socialist type of the architecture. But we have the oldest historical buildings in the middle. But unfortunately, the entire block of the houses towards the seafront was destroyed in the bombardments, and due to the archaeological findings under the rubble of the Second World War, this part of the city was not reconstructed, but historical monuments are shown in this center of the city. The religious center of the city is right here in front of us. It includes on the right hand side the Cathedral of Saint Anastasia, whose foundations date to the 6th century. The cathedral itself, it's a 12th century Romanesque building. Bell Tower was started in the 15th century as the idea for 2 towers in this place here. Since it was the period of the Venetian dominance, they didn't allow the construction to be finished. So the bell tower was only finished in the 19th century according to designs of the British architect Thomas Graham Jackson.
So our viewers are enjoying your walk so much. Would you mind extending just a little bit with us and show us the front of the cathedral?
Of course, not a problem.
Fantastic.
But before getting to the front of the cathedral,
All right.
we'll have to show you the oldest building in the city. That is the small white structure between the pink walls of the cathedral and the big rounded church from the 9th century. The small church in the middle is actually made out of the Roman ruins. Probably the only thing that survived the big earthquake that destroyed the Roman city of Zadar end of the 5th, beginning of the 6th century. And it's nucleus, it's the core of the religious center that developed around it in the following centuries. 6th century foundations of the cathedral, 9th century the big rounded church, the symbol of the city, referred to the famous bishop of Zadar, Saint Donatus, who lived in Zadar in the 9th century, and the beautiful cathedral that we're going to enjoy right now. Going around the religious center and around the cathedral will bring us back to the Roman ruins, to the foundations of the Roman Forum, the main square that partially sits beneath the religious center of Zadar.
And Roman history is your passion, right?
Yes.
He was telling us earlier that he actually does them in costume, Roman history tours in costume, which I got to come back and do that with you.
Of course. I like all aspects of Zadar history, but since we can freely say that Zadar was almost a metropolitan city, it was one of the bigger settlements of the area in the time of Romans, and it never ceased to be the local center of power. It was the same in the time of the Byzantine governing of the city. It was same in the Venetian time of the governing the city, in Austrian time of the governing city as well. I like to consider these Roman foundations very important for the development of the city. Although if we speak of how long the area of the old town is inhabited, it is almost 3,000 years, because it was Liburni people who lived here long before the Romans. Okay? Greeks tried to conquer the area, and the first mentioning of Zadar is in the 4th century before our era, when the Greeks did won a battle against the people, Liburni people from Zadar, but they didn't conquer the entire area.
Wow. So I have a really interesting question from one of our viewers. The question is, has Catholicism always been able to stay the main religion here, even with all of the different dominations?
Yes, it did. Regardless of the changes of the powers, mostly basically from the split of the Christians into the Catholics and the Orthodox in the 11th century, Zadar was pretty much always dominated by the powers that belong to the Western Church, to the Catholicism.
So it's different than in the other parts of the Balkans where
Yes.
Islam dominated, right? Yeah.
Well, this area, as we started with the Venetian land gate that were built together with the walls to stop the Ottomans, this was the border of the Christian world. Unfortunately, during the wars with the Ottomans, Croatia was reduced to the remains of the remains, but it was described by one of the popes of the time as the wall, the rampart of the Christianity.
Yeah.
In the area there are also Orthodox people who lived, most of their lands were subjugated by the Ottomans, and then they broke free in the 19th, beginning of the 20th century.
So I hope you all are enjoying watching this beautiful Saturday evening here in Croatia. We are in Zadar, which was historically known as Zara, kind of a Croatian-Italian fusion village that is, it's one of the largest cities in Croatia, isn't it?
It's the fifth largest city
Fifth
of
largest.
Croatia.
Okay. Oh, the light is just lovely. Look at that. Beautiful Romanesque style church. Wow. So this is your cathedral.
This is our cathedral dedicated to Saint Anastasia. She was a saint burned alive for her beliefs. Her ashes were taken to the Constantinople as one of the centers of the Catholic of the Christian religion. It is interesting story that her remains come to Zadar in the 9th century when the local bishop Donatus, by whom the big rounded church on the forum is referred to now, he brings the remains of Saint Anastasia to Zadar as a reward for making the peace between Charlemagne and the Byzantine Empire.
Oh, wow.
Zadar sits on the border in that time as well between the east and the west. So, but the Saint Anastasia is a saint almost equally revered and worshipped in the Orthodox Eastern Christian Church as in the Western Catholic Church as well. So it's an interesting connection in Zadar, that city that throughout the history connected East and the West.
Wow.
As it sits on the 6th century foundations, it's a Romanesque building from the 12th century. Unfortunately, it got damaged in the crusade, in the Fourth Crusade of 1202. As the Crusaders started towards the Holy Land, they were turned towards Zadar, where they conquered Zadar, spent the winter here, and unfortunately damaged even the churches, even the cathedral of the city of Zadar. When the Crusaders left the city, people returned to the city and rebuilt their places of worship. Since Zadar was the capital city of the area at that time, they decided to make their cathedral even a bit bigger than it was before. They made it longer, extending it forwards for about 14 meters. That's about 45 feet. They reused part of the original front of the cathedral, so all three portals have nicely rounded Romanesque arches. Maybe you can make out that pinkish stone on the front of the cathedral, especially in the lower part.
Yeah.
The original Romanesque cathedral was heavily decorated with this pinkish stone. The pinkish stone disappears as we go upwards, where it was more replaced by a common whiter limestone, but still we have some pinkish columns in the blind arches. The big rose window is Romanesque, but the smaller one in top is obviously Gothic, but which you can make out by more pointy arches. Also, coming back down to the main gate, the main entrance to the church that is flanked by the 4 evangelists, you'll notice that above the main door there's a relief that also has a pointy Gothic arches. So that is something that was added during the reconstruction of the church in the 13th, 14th century, as the renovation of the church lasted for a very long time. In the middle of the relief is the Virgin Mary holding a baby Jesus. To the right we can see the female figure, that's Saint Anastasia, to whom the cathedral is dedicated. On the left side of the Virgin is a man holding a sword. That's the main patron of the city, Saint Kershavan, whom we saw on the flags of the city, who was also the teacher of Saint Anastasia. Unfortunately, the cathedral was damaged in the Second World War bombardments, but in the 1990s war as well. Because all the trouble we had throughout the history, we have even 4 patron saints of the city. Saint Kershavan, Saint Anastasia, Saint Zoilo, and Saint Simeon the Just. All four of them together had to help city stay in one place, survive all the wars, and still live through all of it. Unlike some other settlements of the area that can trace their history to the Roman or even Greek period, a lot of them often ceased existing for a while, then to be resettled again. Zadar survived and lived through all the troubles, through the earthquake that destroyed the Roman city, through all the wars, all the way to the present day.
That's crazy. One other comment I wanted to make before we walk away is if this reminds you of Pisa or Lucca, you are correct. This church is that same style and very similar periods to the Campo dei Miracoli in Pisa and also the complex of churches like San Martino in the town of Lucca in Italy.
Thanks to the Roman net of the streets, we can easily circle around the block of the houses. So we're almost returned to the point we were a few minutes ago, but also at this very moment, we will walk down to the lowest level of the city, and we're literally walking down to the Roman level of the city, to the ruins of the Roman period. The brownish stone that will follow throughout the square are the original parts of the Roman pavement of the Roman Forum. Sitting directly on the transition from the Roman Forum, the main square, to the level where the Roman temple used to be, today we have the only Orthodox church of the city. We were speaking about the wars with the Ottomans conquering the area, coming from the southeast, pushing towards the Central Europe, coming to this very area. From every war, you have refugees that are running away. So there are Greek refugees that came to the city, and the city council gave them one church to use, so the Catholic Church became Orthodox Church. As the Ottomans are pushing more northwards, the Kingdom of Serbia was eventually overrun as well, causing the Serbian Orthodox people to move to this area here, settling around at that time, Venetian city, coming to settle in the city as well, thus continuing the Orthodox practice in the city, which still exists to the present day. As we're getting to the more open area of the Roman Forum, we also get to see some of the Roman ruins, like the mythical faces of the Jupiter and Medusa, and another face of Jupiter that were decorating the area around the temple and the Forum. Unfortunately, from the temple there's not much left besides the pieces of the columns that still lay on top in the area where the Forum used to be, from where certain parts were taken about 300 years ago to make that one single column at the beginning of our tour. But we have an exciting detail. Two corners of what used to be the base for the sacrificing altar, where the animals would be sacrificed to the Roman gods of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, to whom the temple was dedicated here.
Okay, so this is right now the best example of why having a great guide means everything, because they say there's an exciting detail and I'm like, it's dead grass. But no, it's something very exciting.
All the feathers you might see lying around here in the altar area. I don't think there are any pagans in this city, but I think there was a cat that sacrificed the pagan.
So cats are pagan. You've just answered a long mystery. What religion are cats?
This column here is particularly interesting one, because It is the only Roman column that survived the history, still standing in its original place.
Oh, wow.
It is one of the two columns that stood actually in the face of the square in front of the temple. It is shown in the paintings of the city in the Middle Ages, especially nicely recognizable in the presentation of the city by Konrad von Grinenberg. We can see it on the photos of the city at the beginning of the 20th century. We can see it on the photos after the Second World War, when the rest of the buildings around the forum are in the ruins, and we can certainly see it still standing today in the very same position.
What's with all the boat horns?
Yes, because it's also a sort of a national proclamation of Independence Day, not quite a national holiday, but memory day. There's a procession of the boats going through the Zadar Channel
Gotcha.
right now. So
Okay.
all the boats horns as they pass through. As we walk across the forum, you can see the full size of the forum. It's almost 300 feet long and about 120 feet across. So far, it is the largest found forum on the eastern coast of the Adriatic, which tells you a little bit about the importance of Zadar in the Roman times.
And what was the Roman name of the city?
Zadar.
Zadar. Wow, this is huge. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Roman forums, and this is unusually large. So this must have been a very important city in Roman times, yeah. Wow, the light, look at that. So beautiful. Looks like a painting.
Past the ruins of the Roman Forum is a Saint Mary church. It's a Romanesque church as well, although the front now is a Renaissance. This church was made longer as well. It is very important because it belongs to the Benedictine convent, which is very important for the history of Zadar. In 1066, a Croatian king gives land to the Benedictine convent and calls the mother superior of the convent Soror Mea. He calls her my sister, his sister. We are not sure if she's his sister, more probably she's his cousin, but anyway, she's the member of Croatian royal family, showing the connection of Zadar with the Croatian kingdom, making Zadar very important for the Croatian lands, and proving us today how connected Zadar was with the Croatian kings and throughout the history. Because of the ties with the Croatian royal family, when Croatia makes union with Hungary, the first Croatian-Hungarian king, although not coronated in Zadar, comes to Zadar in 1105 to show he will be a good king to the Croatian people, although he's Hungarian. He gives money for the bell tower of the Saint Mary Church.
Okay.
There are treasures to be discovered when you come and visit to Zadar. Sufficient to say that a permanent exhibition of the religious arts inside of the Benedictine convent, you can use the nuns as a guide, or you can call me, whatever you prefer. But the popular name for the exhibition is the gold and silver of the city of Zadar.
Wow.
Treasure kept by the nuns throughout the history, even sometimes preventing intruders to enter the convent with their bodies, preventing from the treasure being taken away from Zadar.
Oh.
Johnny, is it true that those nuns now, they own part of Hajduk? I have heard they own
Yes.
part of the football club in Split.
Yes.
What?
They're enterprising nuns.
I was going to
let's
say they must have a lot of gold if they bought a football team.
They haven't bought the entire football team to explain it. A few years back, the sports team of European soccer, or as we call it, football, transformed from a sort of a NGO to a company that offered its stakeholders to the public, and the nuns decided to support it by buying certain package of the shares.
That's great. Smart nuns.
We can see now from the different angle the rounded church of Saint Donatus. It is the most recognizable symbol of the city. As when you see the Statue of Liberty, you know it's New York. When you see the Tower of Eiffel, you know it's Paris. When you see this, it is Zadar. It's rather unique. There are similar churches, rarely in this size, but it is most recognizable symbol of the city. The bell tower behind it, however, it's not the bell tower of the church itself. It belongs to the cathedral. We made a circle starting from the bell tower around the cathedral. This is Archbishop's Palace from the 13th century now, with the Baroque look of it from outside. So you can see the Roman ruins, the Roman columns from the 1st century that broke in the 5th, 6th century, the 9th century rounded church, the 13th century Archbishop's Palace. The cathedral behind it is a 12th century, and the bell tower finished in the 19th century. You have 2,000 years of architecture in this area, with the cream on top, the socialist style buildings from the 20th century. Inevitable changes over the time, but that's all we can offer you.
That's
the
beautiful.
Full scale of the architecture and the different arts and the structures here in the city. The area that children use as a sliding and a playing ground with a few steps, behind them towards the Archbishop's Palace, you can see the crown of another cistern tank, the central one. As I mentioned, it's a Venetian system of 3 big cisterns throughout the city to have sufficient supplies of the fresh water. On our left, towards the Roman Forum, there's a really beautiful archaeological park with the Roman ruins that were literally dug out right here in this area of the city. You can see the nice line of the medieval walls with the 2 square towers and a small gate between them that belong to the system of the walls from the 12th and 13th century.
Wow.
The small gate between 2 towers is referred as the Angel Gate because it faces the fortress of Saint Michael straight on the hilltop of the island in front of the city.
Well, I hope you all are enjoying this walking tour. If you have joined us in the middle of it, just to repeat, we are in the town of Zadar, Croatia. We're in Dalmatia, which is sort of southern central-ish Croatia. And we are exploring with Johnny, who's an incredible tour guide who you can find at itravel.hr, right?
That's correct. When Venice was extending the walls in the 16th century to make thicker walls to resist the Ottoman Empire cannons, they extended the walls for the width of the street there. But when the city was demilitarized in the end of the 19th century, after 1869, it was concluded that the walls are no longer necessary all around the city. So in this part of the city, towards the sea, towards the island, the city walls were demolished. Part of the sea was filled to create this seafront that we're walking right now. And it's today beautiful open area, the beautiful park towards the sea and the islands.
So what islands am I looking at now?
That's the big island called Ugljan that you're looking at right now.
Okay.
In front of it, there are 2 smaller islands
Yeah.
where you have a gap in the buildings. That's a small island, Škojić.
Okay.
It features even one small monastery. and more to the left, slightly bigger, like and more elevated, like all green hill, is an island Oshljak as well.
Wow.
All the boats that were blowing their horns, you can see sailing in the Zadar channel. Sailing, that is the features of the coastline, were very important for the development of Zadar throughout the history. Because behind the first line of the island, behind Ugljan here, you have another island, Izh, and then further out you have another island, Dugyotov. This type of the coast in the international circles, where you have the islands following the line of the coast, the term is Dalmatian type of the coast, according to this region. Regardless from which side the winds are blowing, the islands provide some cover, some protection. The Croatian coast, Dalmatian coast, is heavily, both Dalmatian and the northern part of the Croatian coast is heavily indented. It has many coves, bays, plenty of shelter for the boats, which was historically very important as well, especially when they sailed just on the sheer force of the wind. And thus, it brought some prosperity to Zadar, but unfortunately it brought some trouble as everybody wanted to control this area, to control this naval route.
Oh, now I see why the Venetians were interested in it. Oh, they're letting off, like, I don't know, fireworks or something.
They're letting off fireworks as well. It's a common use of fireworks when we're celebrating.
Oh, yeah, look at
something.
that. Flares.
As you can see, as you can hear the music being played, I sang before during my tour, so obviously Croatian people are very musical people. A few days ago there was a Eurosong competition.
Yes, and we won. Sorry.
But the only musical band from the territory of ex-Yugoslavia that ever won the Eurosong is a band from Zadar.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
The
fantastic.
band called the Riva.
Ah.
Riva means the seafront.
Ah.
This very seafront that we're walking on.
Oh, that's so cool. I'll have to go back and look and see. I don't remember that I saw them perform. What a beautiful sunset. I hope you all at home are enjoying the gorgeous, gorgeous light. We're getting lots of interesting comments and questions. One of the questions I want to scroll back to was somebody was wondering, like, is there something typical that you would eat here in Zadar? What is something?
When you're traveling through Croatia, you'll get a lot of signs for janjetina.
Janjetina, okay.
Which means the lamb meat.
Ah, yes.
There's several ways of preparing it. Most commonly you can find on the side of the road restaurants that have a fireplaces outside, spit grilling the entire lamb. The other way, very, very traditional for this area, from Illyrian times, is a peka, where you build a fire. When it's almost out, you put the cinders and coils to the side. You put your dish with the meat and vegetables in the place of fire. You cover it with the dome, which is called peka. It can be ceramical ones, like the ones that Illyrians used 3,000 years ago, that we found some in archaeological sites, or most commonly used today are metal ones. You cover it with cinders and coals. The food inside heats for all the sides, and all the juices and flavors stay inside.
Wow.
And it's really delicious. Besides janjetina, you can prepare chicken that way. You can prepare veal meat. You can prepare some seafood like that. And just describing this process brings water to my mouth.
I know, I was going to say, I think I'm hungry now.
That is Andrew's approved method of cooking in this part of the world. Pekka. Anything pekka is amazing. You could just eat potatoes cooked pekka, and they will be the best potatoes in the world. And I've had guests tell me that.
Anything prepared in pekka is simply amazing. And regardless of meat, I think the potatoes are the most delicious. I usually overdo with the potatoes, causing sudden unbuckling the belt or two.
Yeah, I've had the same thing where the meat looks so good, but the potatoes, you just keep going back to.
You can't just leave them alone.
No.
Yeah. I know that feeling.
Oh.
Andrew, I know it very well.
I met my Pekka soulmate.
You would be surprised how many Pekka lovers there is in Croatia.
There's got to be a lot.
You guys know that just doesn't sound good, but just not going to comment any further than that. So for me, I'm imagining, of course, because like I said, I'm a Venetian history fan. I'm imagining those great galleons coming in from Venice, and what an important channel this must have been. Oh, look, more fireworks, flares from the boats. So is this kind of where people hang out, the main?
Yes, besides the main street.
Yeah.
And obviously the Roman Forum being the largest open space in the city center. The seafront that opens to the sea is simply the natural invitation and sort of a living room for the people of Zadar. It's a place where literally city connects with its surrounding areas. You just mentioned the Venetian galleons. One of the French knights participating in the crusade in 1202, Geoffrey de Villars, he wrote Conquête de Constantinople, conquering the Constantinopolis. He describes Zadar, mentions conquering Zadar, describes it as a city of a beautiful white walls, as the white shown in the background of Saint Kershavan on the Zadar flag.
Yeah.
And he describes it as a stone ship anchored in the Adriatic Sea.
Wow.
That is what Zadar is. It lives with its sea. It connects with the coastal hinterlands. Its connection, as I said before, between the east and the west, but it's connection of the land with the sea and the islands.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the most recent monuments that were built to celebrate this very connection. Towards the end of the peninsula, we're approaching the tip of the peninsula. You have a big yellow building which is today government of the county of Zadar, but was originally built as the Navy command of the Austrian-Hungarian Navy. Just next to it there's an old St. Nicholas church hiding there behind the trees. St. Nicholas Church is no longer in use, but should become the future Naval History Museum of Zadar. The remnants of the St. Nicholas convent are already part of the UNESCO's Underwater Archaeology Center.
Oh, cool.
Further to the right, hiding behind the trees and the more recent buildings, is also St. Francis Church, one of the oldest Gothic churches on the eastern coast of the Adriatic.
So I have a question from John Gregory. He wants to know, how mixed is the population with ethnicities? Is it mostly all Croatian?
Yes, it's mostly all Croatians, over 80, almost 90%. Unfortunately, 1990s war brought changes in the structure of the population of the area. Unfortunately, most of the Serbian origins population did succumb to the propaganda of the Milosevic regime from Serbia, and did, if not participate, they supported the rebellion and the attacks towards the city government and the Croatian cities. They landed from the city of Zadar before the attacks towards the city started. When in 1995 we liberated the lands that were under the control of the Serbian rebel forces, unfortunately, again, due to the propaganda, most of those people completely left Croatia. Some have returned since the end of the war, but not all of them. Thus, the structure of the population remains changed than it was before 1990s.
Well, it's a little windy out here, so I hope that's not interfering with the sound for you all, but there's a reason we're hearing strange sounds, isn't there?
You can hear the ocean, or the Adriatic Sea at least, calling on us, calling to us. One of the most recent monuments of Zadar is this monument here. You can see it in a structure of shapes that are coming down to the sea. They are extending from this point onwards. There's more and more steps towards the far side of the instrument. It is the world's only instrument being played by the sea.
Wow.
The movements of the sea, the waves and the currents that sometimes unseeingly move under the surface of the sea push the sea water into the openings that are just at the sea level. The sea water, as it moves into the sea organ, it pushes the air through the plastic, to crudely describe it, pipes leading to the metal whistles behind and below these openings. The air pushed by the sea through those whistles creates sounds, music you can hear, that comes out through these small holes on the top step of the sea organ.
That is, I hope you guys can hear this at home. It is the most beautiful sound.
You can bring the device closer to the openings.
Thank goodness we don't have Borea wind.
We have it a little bit, but not so strong.
Wow, that's super cool. I see a lot of things, but that's something very, very cool.
It is unique in the world. It is the idea of the local architect Nikola Basic, with the help of a lot of his friends, specialists for the different things, for the hydraulics of the sea, for the music, for fine-tuning the whistles, for the stone carvers that carved the stone, for the organ builders. It was actually musical organ builders that built those whistles that make music in the sea organ with the help of the sea water.
So there's a question, why did they make this? It's art, basically, right?
It is an art.
Yeah.
It is meant as a small amphitheater where, as you can see, both locals and visitors sit down
Yeah.
to enjoy this spectacular view.
Wow.
We're just past the time of the sunset. The sun has already set behind the islands in the distance, but still leaving some light. And by the words of Alfred Hitchcock, who visited Zadar in 1960s, who said that Zadar has the best sunset in the world. Looking at this and listening to the sea organ, it's definitely really impressive and spectacular view.
Wow.
If I don't sound very modest about the views we're having, is because I'm simply myself impressed every time when I come to this corner. It's
Wow.
a really loved place by locals.
I can imagine.
This modern installation is a hit. It got a reward in 2006 for a best urban installation solution from the European Association of Architects.
Yeah.
We can look up the exact details of the title of the prize, but it's
2006 it was built, so it's modern.
it was built 2005 and the award was 2006. It is meant really as a place where modern people of the 21st century, like us today, we are using modern devices, we're using internet, we're too much hooked on all these screens,
Yeah.
television, mobile phones, laptops and everything. And the architect wanted to show the Zadar historical connection of the city with the sea and bring people back into the contact with nature. Here you can sit down, enjoy the view of the sea, of the islands. If we or turn past the ship,
Yeah.
in the distance you can see the mountain Velebit, almost mythical Croatian mountain Velebit. You can see sort of a ice, what it is called, glazing
Yeah.
on top of the
Sure.
mountain, the clouds.
Yeah.
It is those clouds that show us the feeling of this wind that we're feeling right now. Still at its gentle mode, it's a pura wind, fresher, colder wind that comes through the mountains. So this is area where you can enjoy the mountain, the sea, the islands, feeling the wind. And if you put one finger into the sea, you're connected with the whole world without internet.
That is fantastic. And on that magnificent note, I think we're going to sign off from our wonderful tour of Zadar. I just want to remind you that our guides, they volunteered to do this. He did this whole tour for you guys for free. So if you would like to give him a tip, you can send money to my PayPal and I will forward it to him. You can also find him directly at itravel.hr. And this has just been absolutely magnificent. I've seen a lot of tours and this absolutely kept me enraptured. So thank you so much for doing such a wonderful job.
Thank you for coming to Zadar. Thank you for showing everybody on the internet, in their homes, the beauties of the city of Zadar. I hope that you enjoyed it and I hope to see you someday in Zadar. Thank you very much.
So if you guys want to come on